So, moving on to this question, is there much research around older athletes and how to adjust their training? Well, there is quite a lot of research done into masters athletes, and masters athletes sort of encompasses a wide range of athletes, with different sports having different age criteria for the masters division. A lot of the research is around these age-related decreases in performance and what mechanisms cause these age-related decreases. So what I want to touch on firstly is that, and then we're going to have a think about how you would adjust a training program for a masters athlete. So why does our performance decrease as we get older? Well, there's a host of reasons, and largely it's to do with a decrease in testosterone in males and in females, and also the estrogen changes that occur in women. And what these do is these change muscle mass, and when we get a change in muscle mass, a lot of other underlying things happen. Largely also as a large decrease in VO2 max as we age. So that's our maximal oxygen consumption, our body's ability to take in oxygen and use it, the maximal rate at which that happens. And this decrease often occurs due to decrease in muscle capillary density, a decrease in stroke volume. So stroke volume is the amount of blood that is ejected from your heart with every beat. That decrease in muscle mass, decrease in aerobic enzyme activity, and also a change in our muscle fiber type or composition. And there is very much a shift to the percentage of type 1 muscle fibers, those slow twitch muscle fibers, which is why a lot of athletes will maintain their endurance as they age, but they won't actually be able to hold on to that speed. And all of this leads to affect, like I said, their VO2 max, their anaerobic or lactate threshold, and also their economy of movement. So it actually requires more energy to do the same amount of work in a masters athlete. So this decrease in performance is most noticeable after the age of 55, and it seems that women's performances tend to decline faster than those of men, and that is especially the case in running. So we know that our performance decreases as we age, and depending on the sport, it kind of varies which age that is, and on the individual as well, but somewhere between sort of 35 and 45, we start to get these age-related performance decreases that become quite significant. And then, as I said before, the greatest declining rate occurs after the age of 55, and women's performances tend to decline a little faster. So, what can we do about it? How do we approach masters athlete training? Well, when it comes to masters athletes, I don't approach them any differently than I do with any other athlete that I work with, and that I'm not treating them or training them any differently because of their age. I am training them and allocating the training load based on who they are personally. So it's really important to remember that just because of an athlete's age, it doesn't mean that they're going to be ready for a certain amount of training, or you should train them at a certain load. It's going to come down to them personally, because some masters athletes have got a huge history of training, others may be quite new, and also they may have different focus things they need to work on. So it doesn't come back to, this is a masters athlete, they're of a certain age, we need to give them this training program. It comes back to the individual. This individual needs this to help them improve their performance. In thinking about that, there are a couple of things that masters athletes, I believe, need to focus on. There is some research out there that indicates the reason masters athletes' performance decreases is because of their training intensity. So their training intensity decreases, and that leads to obviously the performance decrease. So with masters athletes, what I really like to focus on is injecting some intensity into their training, and I find that really helps because often they'll be doing a lot of steady state endurance work naturally, just falling into that comfort zone. So some high intensity work seems to work really well. So one thing I really believe that all masters athletes should do is strength training. After the age of about 40, 45, we start to get this age-related decrease in muscle mass. So our muscles start to decrease in size. So not only for performance is this important, but just general life health and function as you age. So if you can get into some form of strength work, it's going to be key. So it's not just our muscles that start to atrophy or get smaller, it's also our tendons and ligaments as well. So I find that some of that masters athletes that I work with, they really start to struggle with tendon injuries or reoccurring tendinitis, little niggles, pulled calves, that sort of thing. So strength training will really help this out. Also, refer back to what I've just been talking about as well, about gelatin supplementation and potentially that helping with those tendon and ligament injuries as well. The other thing that was pointed out when the question was asked was about recovery. The person who was asking the question didn't feel that training plans that had been on in the past didn't have enough recovery for him as a masters athlete. And while, we do take longer to recover as we age, just because the body's processes take a little longer, and that's largely to do with decreases in testosterone level. Testosterone is one of our key anabolic hormones, and anabolic is just that building up, that repair of muscle fibers, enzymes, everything in the body really. So it is important that we do allow some extra recovery. How much recovery? Again, it's not so much because it's a masters athlete we're dealing with. It comes back to that individual. I have young athletes that are training really hard. I have them on more recovery than other athletes their same age, just because they seem to respond better to that. So it's not so much about masters athlete need X amount of recovery. In general, yes, they're going to require more just because of slower recovery. But again, it comes back to that individualized approach. I would say at least everybody should have at least one recovery day per week. And I've found that a lot of athletes really, really respond well to having 2 recovery days per week, depending on who they are, external factors such as life factors such as work, family, on top of their training stress as well. So how would you know if a training program or a training plan, I'm assuming here that you're talking about a non-personalized plan, so you can just buy one off the internet or download a free one. How would you know if that is too much for you? And this comes back to everybody, not just masters athletes. How do you know if a training program is going to be too much for you? Well, I think a really good starting point is to sit down and have a realistic look at how much time you have to commit to training each week. Rather than trying to cram a training program into your week, have a think about how much time you've got to commit, and then if a plan that you're looking at is greater than the amount of time you actually have, you probably know that it's going to be too much eventually, because you're going to have to sacrifice something else to fit this training in. And often the sacrifice comes in terms of our sleep, usually. So if you're looking at the overall weekly hours of a training program and you're not even going to be able to fit it realistically into your week already, it's probably likely that it's going to be too much for you. So just have a think about that. Have a think about those recovery days. How much recovery do you feel that you need between your key sessions? And no doubt you've probably got a pretty good grip on this. If you were to go out for a long endurance ride or a really hard interval session, how long does it take for you personally to recover from it? Some people will bounce back pretty quick, others may need a little longer. So sit down with the training plan or training program. Have a look at where the key sessions are and think to yourself realistically, am I going to be able to recover between the key sessions? If you're not sure, then it's probably going to be too much, to be honest, because when you're looking at it and you're thinking, oh yeah, that's probably doable, then as things start to accumulate, life factors come into it as well. You'll probably find that you start falling behind, slacking on that recovery. So definitely have a look at that. So just as a little bit of a summary for Masters athletes, I understand I'm starting to waffle on a little bit. So for Masters athletes, we know that there's an age-related decrease in performance, but we can help minimize this with some smart training. First thing, highly recommend that Masters athletes perform some form of strength training work to maintain that muscle mass as it starts to atrophy away as we age. Second of all, I have personally found, working with a number of Masters athletes, that some strategic high-intensity work pays real dividends later on, because it seems as athletes age, that high-intensity work starts to drop off and they gravitate naturally towards that steady-state endurance work. So some high-intensity work in there as well can be of great benefit. Also, pay particular attention to your recovery. You may find that you need additional recovery to perform your key sessions, and often a lot of people will get good benefits by dialing things back a little bit, giving themselves a little bit more recovery time between their key sessions. And this is also really important, not just for physiological recovery, but also recovery of muscles, tendons, and ligaments that are supporting all the load. When they get loaded, they require a little bit more time to get back to baseline. And if you'll find you've got little niggly injuries creeping on in, it could be a sign that you're not getting enough recovery, or addressing those recovery modalities as well. Stretching, foam rolling, mobility type work to keep all those structures working soundly. So I hope that has answered your question. If it hasn't, send me another voice message in with a little bit more specific information, and I will do my best to answer it.